All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Google I/O. We are grateful to have you here. My name is Mike Procopio. I'm a software engineer on the Google Drive SDK team.
And I'm Stephen Bazyl. I'm a developer advocate, also working on the SDK.
And today, Steve and I are going to help you make your apps rock. Okay, so we are here to talk about Google Drive. So Google Drive is the place where you can store your files securely in the cloud. You also get for free the fundamentals of Google Drive: sharing, searching, collaboration, file revisions, organization, even neat little features like upload an image and it will automatically do identification on what's in that image and make it searchable. All that comes for free. With the sync client, right, the sync program, you can keep files in sync from your local hard drive on your machine back home with files in the cloud, and the changes will propagate as expected. And of course, one of the key benefits of files in the cloud is that you can access them from anywhere. So, where are we today? A snapshot with Google Drive. Millions of users have opted into Drive. There are more juicy stats, but that's what we can say right now. And we have fully realized the idea of access anywhere. So that means on the web, but also on mobile devices of various flavors and using Chrome OS. We have an easy-to-use, fully featured SDK, software development kit, with client library support in 8 languages, the second version of which we just announced this morning. Really excited about that. And a snapshot right now in the Chrome Web Store, which is where we go to find apps. We have 50 third-party Drive apps available right now in the Chrome Web Store.
Yeah, and I think we just added Objective-C and JavaScript today, right? In addition to Java, Python, Ruby, and all those other guys.
Absolutely, yeah. So 2 more since V1 of launch, since version 1 of the SDK. That's pretty thrilled about that. So, pretty good foundation. So what's next? Well, the answer is you and our apps and the things that we can do together. That's what's next. Because right now in Google Drive, we have a pretty solid set of built-in applications, right? Kind of first-class productivity apps that offer real-time collaboration, sharing, and all the things that come with Drive. We have a word processor, right, Google Documents, presentation, spreadsheets, and drawings. Kind of the 4 fundamental types that we have right now today in Drive. We also have the built-in Google Drive viewer, which gives you a static preview experience for lots of different file types. So basic things like PDFs and images, videos, and text, we can render a pretty good static preview. Right here, you want to check this out? Here, have a look. And we also have support for a few proprietary formats like Photoshop, Illustrator, and even Microsoft Office formats. So that's pretty great, but it's basic preview only. You can't do anything with it. So here's an example of what you can do right now with the Google Drive viewer on a file type in Drive, right? You can read your scintillating scientific publications that you keep in Drive to remind yourself of how exciting.
And is that actually your paper? I don't think I noticed that before. But
you know, it might be. Yeah, one time when I was a roboticist, yeah, that's that. Cool. I reread it every now and then, and man, it's boring. Okay, so you can also more static preview, right? Preview photos of the places you wish you were on vacation to. And then, of course, video experience is very prominently represented in Drive. You can watch the video of you getting second place in a 5K race over and over again. Not because you're bitter or anything, but that's just what you can do. However, the built-in apps in that file previewer, it's just a start, right? It's just a starting place. As an ecosystem together, we can definitely do better, for sure. So here's a snapshot of apps right now that are already in the ecosystem. Steve's been working with a lot of these partners, and this is where we've landed. More on that here in a second. So if you take away the static preview constraint and actually start to embrace third-party apps in Drive, right? So completely cloud-enabled, access anywhere. These are the sorts of experiences that you can have. So HelloFax is an application that we have right now in the web store, right? You can do something useful with the PDF. You can fax it for later offline consumption when your Wi-Fi goes down. You can also do things like an e-reader can operate on a PDF. There's lots of use cases here. Another example is another app that we partner with, Pixlr Image Editor, a pretty robust, compelling, first-class image editing app that works on the web. And so you can give your photos that kind of hip, vintage look that all the cool kids are doing these days, and instantly thereby boosting your social network street cred.
And then share them on Google+.
Yeah, exactly. Share it on Google+, these hip new photos. But of course, really, we know how you're going to use this, and that is to create lolcat memes early and often. So that's what I use that for. And of course, with the video experience, when you bring it into the cloud with third-party apps, you can do more than just preview it. You can actually edit it now. So your friends don't need to know that you got second place in a race by 1 second. You can edit it, and surely this guy here looks like he's winning the race. We'll see about that. So apps bring life to our ecosystem. So with apps, you can fax and edit, render, graph and draw, diagram, sign and publish, map, chart, listen, mock, and plan. And you can do this all right now, today, with Google Drive apps. And when you build a Google Drive app, one of the key values that our SDK lets you bring to your users is to integrate deeply with the Google Drive web UI, right? Mobile and web clients. And so this means that we give apps a first-class representation in Google Drive for management and viewing product details, searching by things created with the app, as well as the ability to create new using your app, so kind of a launcher kind of state, and of course the ability to open with using your app for the things that it has registered for. So you can use HelloFax to open with on a PDF, for example. So Steve and I are here to help you kind of continue to use this SDK and to build awesome apps. These are vibrant and polished apps that are first and foremost secure. They put the user first, and they integrate well with Google Drive. So let's take a quick look at 9 things that we can do right now to get your apps to this polished state.
Cool, and I'm going to take the first one, which is just to talk about UX. And this is really going to be geared towards apps that are document-oriented, right? So you're building a photo editor, a charting tool, anything like that. So something that fits really well within that Google Apps or Google Docs ecosystem. And I love this quote. This is probably one of the most probably misunderstood and abused quotes among software developers, at least in my history. Whenever we talk about design patterns or conventions or anything, somebody inevitably will bring this up and say, oh, consistency, that's not important, that's only for stupid people. Not true at all, right? It's a foolish consistency. It's when you're doing things for no reason, just because they're a convention, that it becomes a bad idea. But every platform, whether it's Windows, OS X, iOS, Android, they all have conventions for a reason. It's because it makes the users a lot more familiar, a lot more comfortable with your apps. When you're not consistent, bad things happen. So we actually did a little UX study. This is when we were first starting our trusted tester period for Drive apps. And some of the apps we tried were little toy apps that we built ourselves. Some were actually apps from external developers. We put them in front of users and asked them to do just really basic activities with all these apps. And the problem was, because there were so many inconsistencies in how people did basic operations, most of the users, in this case over 2/3 of them, just got lost. They didn't know how to use those apps. So this is Google Docs. This is our word processing tool, and it looks like any other word processing tool, but there's a couple key elements I want to point out to how the UI is put together. Right? So we have some really basic information about what file am I working on. Right? Imagine a text editor that didn't tell you the file name that you were editing. Wouldn't be very useful. Likewise, a lot of us use multiple accounts, so it's really helpful to know which account we're logged in with. Obviously content, that's the point of the app. That's your section. You really want to make this great. Navigation is always nice and consistent up in that, that basic menu structure. And of course, we have our collaboration and sharing. And the cool thing is with Docs is that I can switch over to any of the other tools that Mike talked about earlier, whether it's presentations or spreadsheets, and I'm going to have the exact same layout for all of those applications. And from a user's perspective, that's awesome, right? I can switch to one of these apps and be productive almost immediately. So I want to show a third-party application. This is Lucidchart. And I think they did a really great job at balancing between having their own distinct look and feel and using those conventions that help users be really productive and feel familiar with the application. Lucidchart is it's a collaborative charting tool. Right? You could do flowcharts, Venn diagrams, mock-ups for different UIs. And we're just going to launch this here, and it just takes a couple of seconds to load up. But I'm going to create a new document. And we're not going to give it a title. But basically, you see here, this actually looks a lot like any of the Google Docs editors, right? We have the same elements we had here before, our document title, our file menu, our sharing and account information, a huge content section. but it still is distinctly their app, right? So if you're building applications that are really geared at being productivity apps, that are meant to be complementary tools to the basic office type applications, try to use these consistencies. Try to follow these conventions much as if you were building an app for a mobile platform or one of the desktop environments. And let me switch back to the presentation here for you. Ooh, that was bad. All right, there we go.
All right, thanks, Steve. So one of the key value propositions of Google Drive is that you can access your stuff anywhere. Drive is fully enabled in mobile context. This is something that's very important to us. So one of the things that your app can do to be particularly polished is also work well in a mobile context, which is becoming increasingly how we work. And so by mobile context, we don't mean just phones, but tablets as well, as a very exciting announcement today. And then Chrome OS, just recently, we'd like to announce that Chrome OS has full Drive SDK integration as well. So here's an example of something that works today right now. So an application doesn't necessarily have to build a native app to have a mobile experience. So in this case, Aviary, which is an image editor that's available right now in a web store, you can do basic cropping, these sorts of things, right? It actually is an HTML5 app that works in the web. So there is a native app, but we don't need the native app necessarily to be able to use this properly, right? So I can launch this today and do my editing on the go, whatever's needed, save it back to Drive, and the image is saved there in the cloud. Now, as it turns out, there's also this notion of a native experience, right? These are actually apps that you install from the Android marketplace that sit on your phone, and oftentimes will give a richer, kind of snappier experience in certain contexts that we like to use as well. These, as of our announcement this morning with the Drive SDK v2, also work with mobile, which is very exciting.
They do, and there's actually a really great talk. I think it's this afternoon, right? It's Alon and Claudio from the Developer Relations Group on Drive are doing a talk on how to build native apps.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Chrome OS. So it's not necessarily just mobile, but also the idea that an app should be able to work well in multiple contexts on multiple form factors, ranging from a small kind of 3 or 4 inch screen size to 7-inch to 10-inch tablets, including the smaller screen sizes associated with the most mobile of our devices, like a Chromebook, for example. So here's an example of in Chrome OS right now, which actually natively integrates with Google Drive and brings those files mounted on the web to make them look as if they were first-class local files. And you can actually launch apps that you have installed from Chrome OS and edit them and save them back. It's all seamless and transparent. So that's our mobile story. It works today, and a polished app should have a good representation on a variety of form factors for web-based, mobile, and Chrome OS contexts.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Mike. The next topic I want to talk about is how people access content in Drive. So the examples we saw earlier with the Drive UI and how apps can plug in was all about starting from within Drive, right? So I'm either on my mobile app or I'm in the web UI and I find a file and I click on it and an app magically opens. And a lot of the times, though, when I want to access content in Drive, I'm already in the app that I want to use, right? And there's a lot of cases, even things like photo editors, for example. If it's a really, really rich photo editing app and I could do compositing and bring in multiple photos, I don't want to change context in order to get that content in. So what we have is a JavaScript widget that you can use to actually bring the Drive UI into your application. This is actually just a little screenshot here of just a view for picking photos. And you can customize this picker very easily to fit the context for your application, right? If you're loading text files, maybe just fine to have a list of file names. If, for example, you're a photo editor, you want to have a graphical view where you can show thumbnails so people can find their content a lot faster. And for those who are curious, this is Harley Goat Farms in Pescadero, and I highly recommend it. The baby goats are ridiculously cute. But I want to show you guys a demo of what this looks like. Switch over here. This is just like the basic view for Picker. Doesn't really look all that much different than what you would see for any other native file system picker. And of course, we can say pick our, we'll do a meta presentation here and present our presentation in a demo. If I wanted to do something graphical, I can, again, change this to have images. Another cool thing you can do, actually, though, is let users upload content directly. So say you have all this Drive integration, but it turns out that the file that the user wanted wasn't actually in Drive, and it's still on their desktop. Well, they can just switch over to upload, drag it right onto there. It will upload to Drive, and then we'll send that file information to your app where you can read and write appropriately direct in the cloud. Yeah, so that's basically the picker. It's actually really easy to use this in your application. So this is the code, right? The first thing that you need to do is just include our loader script. That's at googles.com/JSAPI. And then since that's just a generic loader, we have to tell it to load the picker library. Those are those first 2 lines in the JavaScript. Because it loads asynchronously, we need a callback to tell us when it's ready to use. That's where we'll wire up all our event listeners. And when it's time to actually show the picker when you want to load content, we just have these couple lines here where we create the picker builder, customize which views we want to see, whether or not we want to support upload or not. Do we want grid view or list view? There are a whole bunch of options you can do. Give it a callback function and our app ID and show the dialog. So it's all of about 5 or 6 lines of JavaScript to show that dialog and be able to get that content out. Really handy. It saves the users a lot of time because now they can access that content whether or not they're in Drive or in your app. There you go, Mike.
Great, thank you. So earlier in the talk, we talked about how important it was that your app is secure. It's perhaps the most important thing that we can do is to safeguard the user's data. So we make this very easy to do. And the fundamental mechanism for protecting the user's data is this notion of scopes, or levels of access that your application requests, the user approves, and then is then granted to your application, for example, to access files in the user's drive. So once upon a time, these levels of access were kind of very coarse-grained, very broad. Things had access to entire properties or websites, right? So for example, there is such a scope, a security scope, that enables the application to have access to the entire contents of the user's drive. Well, that seems pretty scary. So what we've introduced as a version 1, and then we'll talk about it pretty heavily here today, is this new scope up here called drive.file. And this means that an application has per file access to things on a one-off basis based on user authorizations in your drive. So let's take a look a little deeply, more deeply about how this is going to work. There we go. So this is a familiar sort of consent page, right? On your Android devices, Android has this built-in notion as well. You approve native apps for things access on a more hardware system level, access to your location, access to the contents of the secure digital card in your phone, for example. Okay, so the same notion applies on the web. And here, for example, Balsamiq Mockups, which is one of our partners, is requesting, and it's up to the user to approve, information about your account, your email address. And then here is perhaps the most important request here, is this view and manage Google Drive files that you have opened or created with this app. So this means this app is not requesting broad access to the contents in the user's drive, but rather on a one-by-one basis. So in particular, when the user grants this scope, the app is able to create files in the drive, also open files that it created, and have access to files that the user explicitly granted. So let's take a look at how this works, because we surfaced this notion pretty prominently in the Google Drive web UI. So for example, here is a picture of a place that I wish I was at for vacation, as it turns out. And if we click View Authorized Apps, we will see that currently there is nothing, despite having installed apps, that is able to access that file. So here's all the apps that I have installed right now, okay? Good. So what I can do right now is open this with one of the apps that I have installed. In this case, we will highlight, let's do PicMonkey. So another image editing app, and here's the consent page, right? Fairly clear. Basic information, email address, and I can expand this to see, hey, this thing isn't going to be able to access all the stuff in my drive, but rather just the things that I tell it to. So we're going to allow access to that. And PicMonkey is going to launch, and it takes a little bit of time to first initialize, but the picture of Napoli, which is a city in Italy, comes up, okay? And I can crop and rotate and do all that good stuff. But if I come back right now to Drive, I have just authorized that application for that file. So if I view authorized apps, we will see PicMonkey shows up there. That is the only app that is able to access this file. And we want to be very transparent about this. And if the user wishes at any point in time when they're done, they can simply revoke it, and PicMonkey no longer has access to that file until the user reauthorizes it. So I think that that wraps up the security section. There's a number of scopes, including read-only, and the general notion here is to request as few permissions and as narrow scoping as possible is best for you, your app, and the user as well.
Cool. Do it the old-fashioned way.
Oh, that was the backup.
All right, so another common thing, and this is what we think is one of the really awesome features of Drive, is how easy it is for people to share content. And for those of you that use Drive today, you're probably seeing a dialogue like this whenever you try to share. You see this inside the editors as well, inside docs and spreadsheets and presentations. You get this nice little sharing setting. In the API, we actually have a really low-level API as well. It used to be in the documents list API, is in there in V2 of the API that launched today that lets you manipulate all these ACLs. But it's a very powerful and very dangerous tools. And on Mike's point of requesting the fewest scopes possible, in order to manipulate the ACLs programmatically, you have to request permission to all of the content in the user's drive. Right, and so it puts you in a hard place of choosing between enabling all these features like being able to manipulate ACLs and share files, while still trying to use the least permissive scope possible that makes sense for your app. So we actually have a brand new feature, actually it just hit production I think 2 days ago, and I actually got a developer to implement this in their app yesterday. So I'm going to have a demo of it, but it's, again, this is, pretty much bleeding edge since it was hacked together in about half an hour yesterday.
It's not as risky as jumping out of an airplane.
That is true. So,
but it's still pretty risky.
The consequences of this demo failing are not nearly as bad as Sergey's. Anyway, so Loop is this really cool little app that does photo collages, and they did a whole bunch of integrations. Such as being able to select photos from Drive. So I already had a couple in there, but let's use, I don't know, I could pick it all. Let's just add all of them. So I'll just add a whole bunch of photos, and they're gonna import in here, and I think they even just added I don't know where it is in here. I thought they added a Google logo in here somewhere, but, oh, wait, where is it? Did I pass it again? Oh, there it is.
Woohoo.
Yeah, so we can arrange all these photos in the Google layout, which would be kind of cool if it works. All right, there it goes. And since it's a very social app, right, a lot of this is all about creating these collages and sharing.
This is why we need third-party apps. I definitely could not have implemented that.
Yeah, that would have been a stretch for a demo.
Yeah.
But I should be able to do is to say Google, make it public. So in theory, if this still works, they'll show the sharing settings. So the same exact dialogue that you see inside inside Drive, inside all of our editors, and then I can just go in here and share this send it to my personal account, and same flow as if I shared it from within Drive. The cool thing is the actual work to implement this is pretty trivial. And the fact that they were able to do this in about half an hour yesterday was pretty awesome. So first thing we do, just like we did with Picker, we have a loader script. It is a different one. So if you're using both, you do have 2 different loaders in there. But the rest of it's very familiar, right? So we call this gapi.load, load drive share, again, a callback for when that library is loaded. And we want to show it, it's just 3 lines of code. We build a share client with our app ID. We say which items we want to share. These do have to be items that our app has access to. So they have to be things that we created or that the user allows us to access. And then we just show the dialogue. Super, super simple, really great way to add that sharing functionality into your app with next to no effort whatsoever.
Great. Okay, so another short and sweet kind of tip here is to be searchable. Google Drive lets you find your content very easily. And when you share your content with other users, those users can find it easily as well. So for types that Google knows about, we're able to index them, right? So Google Doc or a spreadsheet, for example, has keywords in it. We index that automatically, and when you search for that file, it pops up immediately. Well, it would be great to do that for third-party apps, and this is something very important to us. So we actually let third-party apps specify every time they save or update a file, indexable text, so basically a list of keywords that the user can use to find your file. Because we certainly aren't able to decode all the data models and the custom file formats that the third-party app is going to use. So here is a short and sweet, quick demo. Now, some say, I've been told, that I have a propensity to use kind of exciting, large words like phenomenal, spectacular, fantastic, and marvelous. And you know, it is true. I actually keep a map of them with a third-party app called MindMeister, and but I don't know where that is. Right? It's not showing up in here anywhere. Okay, so let's search for a word called stellar. Ah, there it is. So this is my map that I keep of all these exciting words. So every time I need to use one to sound particularly important, I can just pull it right off of this map and have various synonyms that I need on an as-needed basis. So here, spectacular, extraordinary, marvelous, covered. So because MindMeister sets indexable text every time they save the file, right, which we know nothing about, we are able to search for that and discover it very easily in the Drive UI as needed. You're good at that.
Tab. That's all I got to do.
All right, another backup.
You had no faith in the network, did you?
No.
For somebody who's building cloud storage, you would expect a little bit more confidence.
Sorry.
All right, so this is another kind of behavioral thing with apps, and also something we learned from doing some UX studies, which is auto-saving. So we've sort of trained users with a lot of these cloud apps now, particularly Google Docs, that they should never have to hit save, right? They should just do their work and things just magically happen, and it's reliable and it's just always up to date and always reliable. And just to show how much people have learned to rely on this, that same UX study I talked about earlier, 4/5 of the users didn't even think about saving their files. They just assumed whatever they typed in, whatever they did in all these apps that we were testing, it just worked. You can imagine the consequences, though, if your app doesn't actually do this, right? So, I'm doing all my work, and 2 hours later, I close my browser, I just shut down, or something happens, right? And I'm sitting here thinking all my content's safe, and it's gone, it's vanished. So think about doing how to do autosave in your applications. There are some complexities, though. Who here attended the first talk on Drive today? Anyone? Okay, so a handful of people. So there was something really cool that was previewed in that talk, which is Collaboration API, which is basically a operational transform, mutation-based API for doing collaboration. That's not something we have ready yet, though, right? So when you deal with Drive, you have to deal with Drive in the context of reading and writing blobs. And of course, if you're going to do autosave, well, you have to make all these different trade-offs now, right? Because if I have a small file, saving that file frequently isn't that big of a deal. But as the file size gets bigger, it becomes more and more expensive for me to do frequent savings, right? So we have to figure out how much quota, how much bandwidth do I want to use versus how much risk do I want to expose that user to in case anything were to go wrong, right? Likewise, the aspect of this is a feature of the Drive API, which is revisions. Anytime that you save content, you have the choice of when to create a new revision that the user can go back and revert to, or whether or not you're just going to touch the head. So when you're doing something like autosaving, you have to think about what save events are significant enough to cause a new revision versus which ones you only want to show up as just an update to the head revision. If I created a new revision on every keystroke, it would basically render the revision history useless, right? I'm not going to sit there and go try to reconstruct 8 characters ago. It's just not something that would be useful for a user. It turns out it's actually not that hard to get this logic right. How you do this in your app is going to be obviously particular to what you're doing. But here's just a little JavaScript snippet that I kind of put together in a demo app, and it turned out to actually work pretty well. And it gave me what I felt as a user was close to expected behavior and close to how our own editor's work. So in this case, all I have here is really just two things. I have an autosaver, which in this case is just going to be an interval function. It's going to run every 30 seconds. We can tune that either way depending on our needs. And it's just going to do a check. If the doc is dirty, I have a change to save, I'm going to save it, right? And it's going to decide, and when it saves, it's going to say, well, if the last time I saved this is really long ago, right? So maybe it's hours, maybe it's days. It's time to create a new revision, right? But if I just saved it 30 seconds ago, I'm just going to consider that the same editing session, and I'm just going to update the last copy. And likewise, we can have an explicit save action in our menu. In that case, this is debatable, but I decided, well, if the user says, I want to save this document, I think that's important enough to create a new revision in our thing. So it actually turns out you can do autosave with blobs. That's fairly reliable, fairly frequent, with actually not that much code. So that's that.
Great. So one of the features that we announced this morning when we went live announcing the Google Drive SDK v2 is a new feature that lets third-party apps operate directly on native Google Docs types. And this is important because, and I didn't get exact clearance on the number, but something like 11 gabillion files that are native Google Docs types are stored in Drive.
That might be a little bit of a stretch, but we'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there, you promise.
Just give us
11 gabillion. That's a lot of native Google Docs types, and there's no reason why third-party apps shouldn't be able to operate on those. Now, as it turns out, that the data type that's associated with, for example, a Google Doc or a presentation is Google proprietary, right? It's kind of a snapshot-based. There's kind of some logging, so we can do things like track revisions, right? It's a fairly intricate data model that we don't need to expose. But what we can do is programmatically expose exportable snapshots, right? Read-only representations of that file. So, for example, what we can do now is a Google document has the capacity to export as PDF. And do we have any apps that can read PDFs? Sure we do. E-readers, faxing. So what that means is right now from the Google Drive UI for apps that support it, and none do yet because we just announced it this morning, but this is coming imminently, you will be able to simply right-click on a Google document or a presentation or spreadsheet and open it with whatever apps can cope with can actually handle the common export functionality. So in this case, PDF for the doc is able to be faxed. And another example is SlideRocket has the ability to read in Microsoft Office presentations, PowerPoint presentations, and our built-in presentations editor in the name of data liberation has the capacity to export in that format. So we can actually import a Google presentation directly into a third-party app, SlideRocket. So that was announced today, and we're very excited about that, and that will be rolling out very soon. Example file formats that we can support are, of course, the obvious ones, PDFs. And then there's a few that may not be necessarily obvious at initial glance. But if you have a text editor, there's no reason that a plain text editor shouldn't be able to open a Google document. And meanwhile, if you have an image editor, well, you should be able to read this kind of vectorized drawing format that we do with SVG or in a raster format like JPEG or PNG. Yep. To do this, it's very simple. You already, in the developer APIs console, you opt into certain types that your app has the capability to open. And with the checking of this box now, which is new, you will automatically be able to do this, and it will be generally transparent to you. You'll just have to read from a different place to actually get the data from the exportable endpoint that we give you automatically. Okay.
Cool, thanks. The last thing I want to talk about is just making your app discoverable, right? The reason we're all building these apps, or well, maybe not all of us, but we want to get users, right? We want to get customers. We want them to use our app, be productive, hopefully turn into paying customers. And they can only do that if they can find our app in the first place. For Drive, we do use the Chrome Web Store as a way for people to discover applications that work with Google Drive. So obviously, it's very important to make sure you have a really strong presence there. Actually, we can even just go and I think as of yesterday, we just added a new collection so people can find apps. And of course, everyone gets this nice little works with Drive badge on their listings.
Look at all those pretty apps.
I know, these are awesome apps.
Yeah.
And you can see, the importance of having a fairly nice presence versus not to point out any, really bad apps, but If you don't do a good job, you kind of get bumped down into the bottom, and nobody's going to find your app. So you really want to focus on making sure you have a nice, clean presence. These are actually reviewed by humans, the images and the assets, and there are certain guidelines that you have to hit, particularly if you want to get into any of the large matters on the Chrome Web Store. So I would encourage you to check out the documentation for Chrome Web Store for how to publish apps, and pay attention to the marketing guidelines on there so that you have a strong presence. But the part that is, I think, even cooler, and this was talked about, if I can actually switch to that. There we go. Is, we talked about sharing earlier. Well, sharing is also an awesome way for people to learn about your app through word of mouth. So this is actually a screenshot of the previewers that we had built into Drive. This is what happens when it finds a piece of content that was created by one of these apps, but the user doesn't have installed. So in this case, I might create a mock-up of say the next version of some great new widget, saves that mock-up in Drive, shares it with me, and I get this. I try to open it and say, oh, well, this was created by Balsamiq. I don't have it. Let me go install it. In fact, we can actually even just see what that looks like here. Actually, I think that I did this one with SlideRocket before. If I click install, I'm going to get this nice link here to the listing, and I can choose to install it. Even better is content that you already have in your hard drives at home on your laptops and your desktops, and you put it into Drive. It wasn't created by any of these apps. We can actually still promote your app based on the type of the file. So I can go into, let's go into Drive, and let's use one of these loop images. So down here in the corner, it's a little small right now. We're trying to get them to make this a little bit bigger. Is this little Chrome thing, a little Chrome, yay. Nothing like an IM during a talk. Anyway, so you can click at this, and actually in this case, we actually just launched this feature like a day or two ago, so there's not that many apps that have added the metadata yet to support this. But what I'm going to get is an app that can do this. Obviously, we'd like this to show PicMonkey and Aviary and so on. They just haven't done their updates yet. But I think there was in the earlier talk, for those who saw this with Microsoft project files. There's 3 or 4 apps in the Chrome Web Store that can open up those files very easily. So it's a great way for people to find your apps, and to enable Drive to be able to to promote your app that way. There we go. Is actually pretty simple. You just have to add a little bit of text to your manifest for the Chrome Web Store that basically describes the MIME types and the file extensions. And actually, in this case, file extensions are just kind of modeled as MIME types. In this case, I'm just saying I can do text plain, or I can do anything that ends in .txt, which is that really, really long MIME type. And this will basically allow us to search for apps in the Chrome Web Store that can handle certain content, so that when users migrate their files to Drive and they put everything in there, they can open it and find your apps to work with those files in the cloud.
That's great. You know what I love about that is you don't have to go to a store to find an app. It's actually, discovery is built into regular workflows like sharing and just viewing your file.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to discover new content, new apps.
So good. A quick recap then.
Sure. I'll hand that off.
So we've shown you 9 things that we can do here and now to make your app rock. So UX matters, right? UX consistency, user experience, user interface consistency. Having a solid mobile story, making sharing super easy. Security first and foremost. The ability to open anywhere, including opening files from your app. Setting indexable text so you can be searchable and discoverable, the files built with your app. Saving early and often with autosave. Opening Google Docs types directly without having to manually export first. And of course, being discoverable in the Chrome Web Store and in our standard workflows.
And the thing is, not all of these are going to apply to every app. But the idea is that these elements are things that the apps that are successful, the apps that are really well polished and get great reviews, all adopted elements of these things. So obviously, pick and choose which ones apply. But just a lot of things to think about in designing your apps.
Definitely, good advice. Okay, so what next? Well, what are you going to build? there are, and I had to get special clearance for this one too, zillions of files stored in Drive.
Yeah, not quite there yet, but close.
Let's keep cranking. Files of all types, right? Things that you would think of. Lots of images and videos and PDFs, productivity suite applications, text in rich text format, plain text, zip, RAR archives, and lots of source code files, interestingly. So what people are doing is just kind of blanketly moving to the cloud, uploading entire hard drives. So the question is, what can we do to bring life to these files, right, that exist right now in Google Drive? So basically, we're in this kind of new era of the cloud. And the short story is, if we needed an app in the desktop days, well, we're fully cloud-enabled now, and so we need it now in the cloud. Now, did you change? That is Comic Sans. That font is Comic Sans. Did you change that?
I may have.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is
Honestly, I'm a fan of Comic Sans.
of Comic Sans.
I can't actually say that with a straight face.
Okay, so I know, I can tell. This is what happens in a collaborative environment. You know, there's revision history on this.
There is. So we could find out who actually
Just saying,
did that.
I'm going to find out. Okay. So, but let's take this one more. It's not just about the files that are in users' drives across the world right now. It's also about experiences that you can have. And sometimes the file type is secondary to the experience. So take, for example, Desmo's graphing calculator app here, right? You can actually save the equations that you enter in and persist them into Drive, for example, teaching and lectures in a scholastic context. But really, graphing is kind of real-time learning about the app, learning about what the equation does and how it plots and what 1 over x, y equals 1 over x looks like, right? So it's all about the experience right then and there. So there's lots of apps that are like this as well that aren't necessarily about the files stored in Drive, but rather the capability and the experience when using the app. So we'll go ahead and start to wrap up now. We'll have some questions here shortly, but let's just say one thing I wanted to mention is that we are here for you, developer advocates and engineers. We work hand in hand. Love these guys.
Yeah, we have a really great relationship with the engineering team. When you guys ask a question on Stack Overflow or you have a feature suggestion, it's basically just a hop, skip, and a jump before it gets down to the actual engineers building it. And of course, you can actually meet a lot of the team in the sandbox today. In fact, we'll be there afterwards, and you can come meet both the developer relations and the engineering team, and I think even a few PMs too, right?
Sure, sure. So the short story is my job is to make him happy.
And my job is to make you happy.
Yeah, exactly. So you see how this works. This is going to work out well. Things you can go to right now. The version 2 of the documentation is live and fully squared away here. developers.google.com/drive. And we also have a support forum, right?
Yeah, Stack Overflow. We have a Google Drive tag on there and a bunch of us on there that are constantly answering questions. A few of them in the back of the room. And we do try to respond pretty quickly. I think our response rate's almost 100%.
That's impressive. Well, thank you guys very much. We are grateful for your attention, and thank you again. So we'd like to open up the floor to questions at this point. If you have a question, come up to the mic so we can get it recorded.
Yep. Yeah, we have a little bit of time, and if we run out, we can take it outside down to the sandbox and keep chatting. Go ahead.
Turn on the question mic, please.
Or you can just shout it out and we'll repeat it for everyone.
So my question is just a little bit about the model. So do you have to have your app installed in like Chrome to be a document editor? I saw in your scenario when you try to open up a new doc, it suggests you install it.
Yes, yeah. So right now for integrating into the UI, that installation does have to originate in the Chrome Web Store. That is something that we've gotten a lot of feedback on. We are trying to make that a little bit of a smoother experience. So stay tuned for hopefully.
But it is possible to have an app that edits documents that it just lives on its own URL and it's in your own domain.
Yeah, as of this morning, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. The installation requirement to use the API is no longer present. It's just there if you want to integrate with the OpenWidth Create New inside the web UI.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Great. Good question. Thank you.
I had a quick question about the security model. You're saying obviously only use as few permissions as you need.
Yeah, sure.
I found though, especially with Android apps, a lot of times developers will ask for a lot more permissions than you really think they should need. And sometimes it's for some optional feature. Sometimes it's for something like monetization or advertising or whatever.
Right.
it looks like it's kind of an all or nothing model. There's no way I can just, like, for example, the loop sandbox you showed, it's asking for more permission than I think it should need. Is there any way I can say, well, you can have these, but not this particular one? Try and work without it or something?
So that's actually a really good question. Yeah, our OAuth grant page does not allow for optional permissions right now. So yeah, it is one of those things where typically the reason why you see a lot more scopes is because people want to be able to get your identity so they can establish an account for single sign-on. Often they ask for an email address. If they're doing sharing, sometimes they ask for contacts and things like that. But yeah, there's no way right now where you can say during one of those requests approve all but one. Right? It's an all or nothing proposition for that. What Mike was really referring to was the within Drive moving from all your content or none to a model where now it could be just some of your content.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you're talking about is a little bit of a different problem and yeah, something we're aware of.
Okay. I just was curious because, I mean, basically you're suggesting people don't ask for the all, complete permission, but since developers still can do it, how does the user respond when they want to use something where developers asked for all that? So
We try and make the coarse permissions as scary as possible, right?
Yeah.
But let's chat some more. This is a tricky problem, right? Let's chat some more afterwards. Ivan, did you have? Repeat the question.
Sure.
Got it. Okay. Next question.
+1 on the last guy's suggestion. That's a really good idea. Similar on that same vein, is there any desire to have the apps be able to have permission over a folder, not just like file specific? Has any developers asked for that?
Yeah. So
It's a really good idea.
yeah, the question is any plans for folder scopes instead of file scopes? Right? Yeah, it's something we've heard a lot. And yeah, duly noted, but yeah, can't give you any plans yet.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
The indexable text, is that just keywords, or like for Balsamic, that's just markup? So is that whole thing searchable, or is it just keywords that they specify?
In general, it's just kind of raw text that we accept. We actually accept it in a HTML-based format, so we're able to parse out URLs and these sorts of things. But it doesn't have to be in any specific format. It truly is kind of an abstract. Here's a kind of a string field. Set your indexable text in whatever kind of tokenized, parsable string words that you want, and we will index it accordingly. So pretty simple to use. Thank you. And that question regarded indexable text and how to use it and whether we can actually parse custom data models, and the answer is yes, because it's raw text.
Is the Drive SDK going to be replacing the Docs API?
The question is, will it be replacing the Docs API? It is as of today feature equivalent. So yeah, anything that you could do in the Docs API is now, should be everything. It is possible in the Drive API. So yeah, eventually that, I would expect documents to get deprecated. Right now, Vic, do you know if it's getting deprecated anytime soon, or? You would know. This is your. It will replace. Yeah. The documents API. Yeah. I mean, for now, they're both supported.
Yeah, feature parity, and it is the new API that we're going forward with. Yeah. Thank you. Time for a couple more questions?
Yeah. Hi. Did you think about localization? Like, for example, if you have that full text search, that I can give a hint which language that is, or for actions, that I can say instead of open, what would be the localized version of that? Is there something in there? I didn't have a look at it yet, but did you think about that?
So the question is generally about localization and how we're going to support, and I heard kind of two questions in there that were good questions. The first concerns verbs, like in the open with menu in the web UI. So the short answer there is that those strings are all translated. Mm-hmm. So, and I think some 40 different languages, the open verb itself will be translated.
But
also,
custom.
the target of things that you can create. So for example, in Balsamic, it's not a Balsamic that you create a wireframe, right? That target is now or is very soon going to be fully localized in all the languages. And then I think the gentleman's other question was more of how can we localize kind of full text search?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To add on to what Mike was saying, though, some of the widgets that we show, like the picker, for example, you can actually that's fully localized. So when you do the load, you can specify a language. I don't think sharing is Actually, that might render based on the users, because we know who the user is, so that might actually render. That I can find out.
Yeah.
And a full text search is a really good suggestion. I don't think right now that that will do that, but
And for
it's a
custom
really good idea.
and for custom verbs and targets, did you think about that? Like instead of open, I don't know, edit would be localized, of course, but you know, other verbs like, I don't know, sign or something like that.
Right, exactly. So the question is, what kind of verbs will show up in the open with menu, right? And so this is kind of a classic UX trade-off. You create like an enumeration of things you can do, you know, fax or sign, as you said. But at the same, so it's more accurate, but there's an elegance to having just like a single, whatever the verb is, it's under a kind of an open with thing. And so there's a trade-off here with how fine-grained we want to get and any friction that may bring in.
Yeah, right now the only thing that's supplied, that shows up there, that's applied by the developer is actually the product name or the type of item that you're creating. The verbs aren't customizable yet.
Good question, thank you. Well, great guys. I think our time is right on time here, so thank you very much for your attention. We are around here and remain at your disposal if you want to come chat with us. We also have office hours here. And great, thank you very much for your attention. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.